My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is a creator, an educator, facilitator, and an advocate. This is a really great episode. Within this episode, we talked about them being from Florida and returning to anti-trans Florida. We talked about community and creativity in Florida. We also discussed, and they gave some really neutral advice on what to do if you live in Florida and you want to get out of Florida, and also what to do if you live in Florida but wanting to stay in Florida. We also discussed finding community within Florida. This is a really great episode. I hope that you enjoy. Hello and welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his, and I will be your guide throughout this journey on the show. This show is a platform where trans men of color voices will be amplified as we share our stories. Trans men of color are not monolithic. What that means is our journeys are not the same. We come from different backgrounds. We have different stories, family relations, chosen family, and most of all, we have different transition journeys. Visibility equals possibility. I like to say that all the time. We like to highlight on this show trans men of color businesses and entrepreneurs, parents, athletes, survivors, and many other issues and topics that are relatable to trans men of color in our existence. Dem Bois Podcast is not only a platform to amplify our voices, but to raise awareness and conversation around our lived experiences. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting, listening, and sharing the show. Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. My next guest is an arts creator, educator, facilitator, and advocate working at the intersections of mental health, accessibility, and sustainability. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. My name's Elle. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm very happy to be a part of this.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you here. I cannot wait for folks to hear your journey. So the name Elle, how did that name choose you?
So it's actually a shorter version of my previous middle name, which was Elizabeth, which is Elizabeth in Spanish. And I thought that that was like still a beautiful name, not for me, but it was cool. And I used to joke when I was younger that it meant L is a vet because I thought I was going to be a veterinarian. So then, coming into myself and trying to figure out what name I actually wanted to use instead of the one that was passed down to me. I was like, oh, I can just circle back to that. And like L was really nice. Elio, Elias, thinking of shortened versions of other masculine persons in my life. L is also a part of their name. So L was mine. And then in Spanish, it's the and he. So I say I am the he.
Oh, I love that. So, Elle, so I take it that you're not a veterinarian.
I am not. I saw a dog getting a sponge removed from its intestine one time on TV, and that's all it took for me to be like, okay, never mind. I don't want to do that,
You like, this is not my ministry. That's not where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, no, I want things to be happy to see me, and I hear the animals are always like terrified to see the vet. So I was like, no, I need a little bit of that feedback.
Yeah. I don't know. My dog, I don't know. He's funny acting. Sometimes he growls and sometimes he's happy. Yeah, I can see that. You want somebody. Well, I mean, even as people, right? We're not necessarily happy to see the doctor because if you're going to the doctor, there's probably something wrong, right?
But, yep,
So
yeah.
it's like I'm not really that excited to see you. Just tell me what's going on with me and let's get this
Mhm.
so I can get the hell up out of here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that definitely folds into like my teaching and educating as well, is like that realization of myself and how I want to interact with other persons that are also like, even if they're hesitant, like are happy to be there, like in presence, doing some sort of creative task.
I love that. So I want to ask you if you mind telling us your transition journey from beginning into wherever you want to start until up to where you are now.
Yeah, so I definitely, from the jump, straight out the womb, was like, I want to be a boy. And I don't know why y'all aren't listening to me. I don't know how to make this happen, but I need someone to listen. And there's definitely a lot of signs that my family later on realizing that this is an option, that this is something that people do. that they've clued in and been like, oh, yes, we did see you doing XYZ, saying these things, reflecting on these conversations I had, or even just the look I had looking at certain family members versus the others and saying, like, I want to look more like my dad, not because of his skin color or like his cadence, his walk, anything like that, but it was just the actual masculinity of his presentation. And then slowly through getting to explore spaces outside of my hometown, which is, very, very small. We're like a third of the Mexican population there. Basically, my family is several generations deep. So expanding outside of that, I kind of realized that there were options. There was like choices that we could make. We could be autonomous for ourselves. And then we could also be open to how others were as well. And getting to know other trans folks, non-binary people, I was like, oh my God, why didn't anybody tell me this? Like, I have to run back and let everyone know. Like, I was like Mr. Rager, like Kid Cudi, like coming back, spreading the word of like, did y'all know that there's people out here that are so free and like able to like mix it up and stuff and fully explore themselves. So that was kind of like the beginning for me. And then, top surgery, HRT, that good stuff.
So do you remember what age you was when you said, "Hey, folks, I think I am a boy." You remember what age that was?
Oh Lord. Probably like five. I don't know. That's the picture they have of me in like my brother's clothes, beaming ear to ear, very excited. That was also probably around the time that I was wanting to cut my hair a lot and like wanted to look like my brother. I wonder why. And like cutting my hair, trying to kind of rebel, but also not seeing it as rebelling, just seeing it as like simply existing and making choices that reflected my inner self. So I mean, it was from very early on.
So 5 years old. So how did your parents take that? Were they receptive to the idea, or was it like, no, don't say that no more. We don't want to hear that come from you anymore. Like, how was that from your parents?
I think when I was younger, it wasn't really like a bashing of any kind. It was just confusion. It wasn't it like I think they tried to rationalize it as like, oh, you're seeing the ways that men are treated in the world compared to women, and maybe that's why you want to be more of a man. Or like you have one sibling that's a brother and you always hang out with him. But it was never really like a demonizing kind of thing, like I think they tried their best to kind of understand as it was happening. Like in middle school, when we went school shopping, I could pick like I think four shirts out of like the boys section, and the rest was girl stuff. But they gave me like those little inklings. Like they were really doing the best they could with the knowledge. But thankfully for them and for myself, I kind of introduced them to this new knowledge for myself, and actually ancestral knowledge for like our cultural backgrounds about gender identity through my friends. I would bring friends around and be like, this is this person's pronouns, these are what pronouns are, they are trans, whatever, these are some of the issues that the trans community's experiencing. So by the time my transition came about, um, I had already kind of laid the groundwork for a lot of those conversations by having these conversations with them about other folks and educating them through the lens of my own love for my friends.
You said a cultural ancestry or a cultural background. What you want to
Yeah.
talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so both sides of my family are come from Mexico. One is from northern area, one is from a southern area. Um, Both sides have not been back very much. We have a little bit of family still in the south of Mexico, a little bit, but even then, I see the same kind of dynamics happening of like this Western idea of gender being like very man, woman, you're born with it through specifically in my case, like Catholicism, like that is a guaranteed one or the other. These are the reasons why there are these two sexes, and you never change because reproduction. Um, However, like in Mexico, there's a lot of other various indigenous peoples that had more expansive understandings of gender. So a lot of what I have done with talking with my family members is talking about how colonization really affected how like our current family members, even in Mexico, view gender. versus how our folks were viewing it way back in the day from like Otomi people, which is where my family, specifically my dad's side, descends from, where it wasn't so black and white, male, female, and like rigid, where you're stuck. There was a lot of more of like transformational purpose and possibilities.
I see a lot of stuff now, especially on like social media, where people try to wait. Social media really kind of irks me sometimes because people,
Mhm.
I, I don't feel, I
Let it
don't
out. Let it out. Say it
understand.
how you want to say it.
I don't understand why one video, one post should have 13,000 comments. Like that is mind boggling to me. Like, why does everybody have a fucking opinion? Okay, we all have an opinions, but not everything should be vocalized or should be put out there,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So what I see a lot, and I don't know why I go into the comments. I'm always told, don't go into the comments, don't look at the comments, but I do anyway. And then I end up pissed off. And then I'm like, fuck
Hmm.
this post. Now
Hmm.
I'm getting out of here because of the comments. But one thing that I noticed that people say in comments that on posts about trans folks is you rubbing off on our kids, or like this new idea of gender and all
Hmm.
these things. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, it's like this is brand new. But
Hmm.
you're telling us, no, this isn't brand new. You want to speak on that a little bit more about how this idea of gender is not brand new.
Let me whip out my soapbox. Yes, gladly. Well, mostly because like whenever I see comments like that, I'm like, shit, I wish it had rubbed off on me. Like, I wish
Mm,
I had seen more of this. I wish I had known that there was a possibility. And I think if I can segue my soapbox, my way back onto it, um, a lot of people talk about, the kids getting influenced as if like any influence that is outside of their scope of what's good and right and morality is bad influence,
mm,
is scary influence, and that it's new. So a lot of people that just haven't been exposed to this, that don't know history about specifically how indigenous peoples have been colonized to believe through man's understanding of Christianity, what gender truly is, has really shortened our understandings in general. I can only specifically speak for brown communities, specifically more Central Latin American areas. But Spaniards were still white. And you can ask anybody that has been colonized by Spain how they feel about Spaniards, and it'll go from the way they have a lisp when they speak, all the way to they fucked up our ancestors, bringing this, European concept of gender and again morality as okay, these ways that y'all understood gender, how you related with each other, how perhaps you even held special sacred space for folks that were in our Western ideas non-binary or in flux between these genders. No more of that. That doesn't fit within our book that we're bringing over here under Blood and Fire, because that should convince you that we're the good guys, coming over here through force, to tell you what is wrong about what you're doing and how we can make it right. So taking gender out of the context of like really seeing it as like a beautiful spiritual non-binary, and when I say non-binary, I like to break that down a little bit for folks that are not familiar with that word. Binary is just meaning there's one and the other. By two, you can think of coding zeros and ones. When we say something's non-binary, it means that there's more possibilities than just those two. So, for colonization purposes, and when I say colonizing, also it's, people not minding their own business in one country and popping over to another country and being like, this is mine now. Yum, thank you. And now y'all all gotta act like us. That was a way of like placing control on them as to what their roles are for the betterment of what they wanted to see in that land, not for the betterment of the people that were already there. So for me, when I talk to my family members or other folks that are not white specifically, I really like ask them to think about, what would our cultures be like if we hadn't been, um, you know, put into this other lens of what we should be or how we need to change our practices, our cultural practices. And a lot of these practices have been so enmeshed in that colonization, speaking specifically for Mexican American folks with Catholicism a lot. to where I honestly have like empathy for Mexican American folks that didn't grow up in Catholicism because it's so heavily culturally ingrained now that this is part of us. Virgin Mary is part of us. She's a symbol of so many things that honestly, outside of spiritual contexts, are very radical and feminist. But we only understand it through this like holier than thou lens of like, yes, she is a woman. That's why her heart gets stabbed. She got the rib out of Adam and now she getting stabbed, it kind of gets like wound up, I think, and that's the shortest way I can do that soapbox to save time.
That was nicely explained. I appreciate you for breaking down like a lot of those terms. And I say that I say this all the time, really. I say a few things all the time. One thing, I think the way the world was supposed to be. This is how I envision it in my mind. If I close my eyes and I say that the world was never colonized, I feel like we were always supposed to travel and mingle. Hey, I'm gonna come to your town. I'm gonna pick up what I need. Ooh, that little
Mm-hmm.
spice, it tastes really good on my chicken back home. Take
Mm-hmm.
your little spice, borrow it. Okay, maybe you find somebody that you love, whatever gender that person is.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm either gonna stay with these folks and y'all carry on, or you wanna marry me? Let's go back together, right? And I feel like we were all supposed to interact with one another, and we were supposed to take what we need and leave what we don't, and go back to where we were. And obviously that didn't happen because of greed and all of this plethora of things that colonization brings with it. But then also, like I always say too, that people, we are not meant to be the same. It's not like we're making a dozen cookies and every cookie is pressed with this little cookie cutter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't say that I'm influencing a younger person. No, I'm just like I always say too, like visibility equals possibility. And I'm just showing a person what is possible when you live your true authentic self, right? And so we're not all meant to be alike. Why would you? I don't want to be like you, L. Why would
Mm-hmm.
you want to be like me, right? We're
I
all
don't want to be up that late at night.
yes. So before this call, before we got on this recording, we talked about our differences in hours. I'm a night owl, and then you are an early morning person, and that
Mm-hmm.
just don't work. So, right? Why would you want me to be like you? Why would you want me to get up at 5:30 in the morning if that's not healthy for me? Right? So we're all are different. We all have our own differences, and we're supposed to share and truly enjoy. To truly enjoy another human being is to accept our differences, and that's
Mm-hmm.
just it, right? And the phone that we have in our hand is not to influence somebody, but it's an awakening, and to be aware. Like some of the things I see on my phone I would never see in other countries, and pictures of beautiful scenery and all this stuff, right? It's to
Mm-hmm.
bring us information, but it's not to influence us in any way. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I had so many little Jimmy Neutron like zipping around moments between things that you were saying. I was like, no, no,
Yeah.
no, focus on what his next thing is. I would not wish this ADHD on you. I wouldn't wish, said
Yeah.
many things. One thing that resonated at the beginning of what you were saying, about like visibility and stuff. One thing that I always said growing up, in a place where there was no visibility of any trans folks, was that you don't have to be what you see, because for myself and many other like young ones that still live there or never leave, like that all you see is a repetition of that same cookie. And for us, I'll say for us, we see each other and we're like, I wouldn't want you to be just like me because maybe that's not good for you. We got people that are like, I want everyone to be like me because I am the right way to be. And that entitlement and that entitlement that comes with unchecked power,
Mm.
um, is very interesting to see in people. And I guess like my own individual way of like fighting back at that as like a facilitator of creative experiences is really opening the door to being client led. Like, what do you want to make today? I'm not going to tell you what you need to make. Like, unless that's part of, our deal here, like, I'd rather come into the room and meet who's there and then assess what the needs are rather than saying, well, I like to make this thing. So therefore, it's going to be good for all of y'all to make this thing, especially if it's a community space and we're creating something for a community space. There's no way that I'm going to go in there and be like, I know what needs to be on this wall that all of y'all are going to look at every day, even though I'm not the one inhabiting this space. So I think that autonomy and, giving people choice to be themselves, express themselves in a way that's really authentic to themselves rather than imposing what we think is the right way is important, in addition to trans spaces as well. which I love about this podcast is that you're getting various different trans experiences with similar, intersections, but that doesn't mean that we are a monolith either. Even if we're at that little marginalized point in the corner, there is such rich variety in us with ways we choose to physically or socially transition.
Absolutely. I love that. That's the point, right? To show that we all have different experiences within our
Mhm.
trans journeys, right?
Mhm.
And we may all end up at the same place and we may not, right? Because we didn't start at the same place. So
Mhm.
it's different. So it's to show that, hey, maybe somebody might resonate with me a little bit more, but maybe somebody might resonate with you more than me, right?
Mhm.
And that's okay. And because we all are different, and to embrace our differences.
Mhm.
And so I usually ask this question in the beginning when I talk to folks, but I wanted to say this one for later on because
Mhm.
I wanted to really dive into this. So where are you located?
Oh, yes. The key one. My
Yes.
favorite intersection is being from Florida. So I'll say that I was born, raised, and returned to
Born,
Florida.
raised, and returned to Florida.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? I'm going to speak for other folks. Well, I'm not going to speak for nobody else. I can only speak for myself.
Uh,
Why the hell you go back to Florida?
Yeah, so like I said, I'm generations deep in Florida. Like, I like to tell people I'm like, I'm not much for the inspiration porn of like, if I can do it, you can do it. I'm like, all right, not everybody can do shit. I was like, but listen, if I can expand my mind outside of this podunky shit that I was believing before, you can do it. Um, and so as much as it's been painful, over the years, like I've moved around different places in the US. I went to Mexico for a little bit. I returned to Florida because my brother has kids now. And as they were infants, I was bopping around more and I would come back and they didn't recognize me. And this was pre-transition. It wasn't even like, I was looking like a whole different dude. This was like before, and I realized that that was really important to me as someone that, I wanted to be a birth giver for most of my life. But now with everything going on, I'm like, is that fair to be bringing someone into this distress? Which is my personal conflict of the moment. But seeing these young ones that are in proximity to me and wanting to have some alternative influence on them that doesn't have to be like seen as good or bad, but just for them to know who I am and for me to know who they are was really important to me. Um, to just have that connection. And a lot of the times when I moved to other places, people had that same reaction, but more of like, why are you so far away from these people that love you so much? Because as much as Florida, there's so much hate all the time from so many different areas. This is where I have a lot of family that are very supportive, that are very loving. And, my spouse is also trans. So that's, adds another level. I always say, if they come for one of us, they're gonna get a 4-for-1 with all of our intersecting identities, the two of us. They're gonna be like, whoa, this is my hater's day of success. Um, so we did consider like over the last year or so, partially it was financially. We couldn't afford to move and start over in another state, even if we had a few people there. Just financially, it didn't make sense to do that. And it really did come down to, okay, are we going to move to another state in the US and then potentially have to leave the US? Or do we want to find some stability where we have this support in this community and then see if we need to literally jump ship into another country? Financially, it made more sense, emotionally for us as well, because um, I just feel very lucky that like I have found my community in the space that I've always loved. You know, Florida has been so much heartbreak, even small town to whole state. Like every time I've come back, it's been like a slap in the face of like, oh, y'all are still back in that decade of the millennium. Oh, I have expanded so much farther past that. And for a while, it was very much like, martyring myself, where I'm like, well, I have to sacrifice myself to pay it forward to these people. I have to be the visibility to this and that. But over the past year, my spouse and I were living in my family's garage before like securing this housing. like a permanent housing situation. So it really made me think about, going places where folks maybe only know me online, but not in person, and having to establish that community again and again. And I've done it so many times. And through my work that I sell locally here in Central Florida, I've really gotten to see more of a community and establish more of a community that is like so loving and uplifting that I never thought I would experience in Florida. So it was partially emotional and partially financial that we decided to stay. We have definitely had people that are like, listen, if you need to leave in the middle of the night, pop up, show up in like these other, cities, like no questions asked, like we'll house you, whatever. Um, but just like having to go through that duress over and over. And at the end of the day, I really am like a Florida boy. Like even when I lived in New England and stuff, I was like, I'm so glad I did it this way and not the opposite. Because I feel like when Northerners come to the South, it's like a whole like it rips their brain and their soul in half to witness all the shit that's like normal here. The Northerners,
Just
like when
coming.
they come to the South, they're just like, damn, like this is crazy. For me, when I went up north, I was like, oh, this is mild. So so for me, like I was so, not to say that it's not bad, but like I have I guess like stamina for these
Mm.
things. And like a lot of stuff will roll off my back very easily. People take it as like optimism. I'm like, no, I just know how much worse it could be. So for me, it's not as distressing to be in Florida because I'm from here and I've seen a lot of it, and like a lot of what is like even magnifying now, like I've witnessed it in individuals. So it doesn't really have the shock and awe to me that I understand like a lot of folks outside of Florida like see it as and experience it as, um, which again is neither good nor bad. It's just something that I've realized that pays into us deciding to stay rather than go to another state to then eventually, possibly after this election, look for elsewhere.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron, the host of Dem Bois Podcast. Are you enjoying the podcast so far? Great. I'm glad that you are. Would you consider donating today to help support the continuation of this podcast? As you know, this podcast aims to serve as a platform to highlight and amplify the voices of trans men of color and share our transition stories. The podcast not only aims to amplify trans men of color voices, but it also raises awareness around our lived experiences. You would like to donate? Where can you donate? Great. I'm glad that you asked. Link in our description will take you directly to Network for Good, whom we've partnered with in order to collect donations for the podcast. Or you can visit our website. On the website, click the donate button, and from there, you are able to donate directly to the podcast. All donations are tax deductible. What does the donations go to? Oh, I'm glad that you asked. Your donation will help to support our production costs. We are working with Jasmine from Pink Lady Productions that brings you this awesome content. And also, we pay our guests an honorarium. Pay our guests an honorarium. Yes, we do. Why? Because as trans men of color, we would like to support and uplift each other and honor the time that's given out to come here and share their stories. So if you love this podcast, share and donate. See you on the next episode. Take care. You said that you have stamina to be there. So you pretty much saying that you could take it. Whatever's dealt to you, you have
No,
it. You
I'm not
willing to
trying to
take it.
challenge them, but
Oh, okay.
like, don't
Okay.
give me more. But yeah, and I think I used to, and I hesitated to say it in that way because I don't want to glorify like the idea of resilience. Like, I really don't think that there is like no morally correct way for anybody living in Florida to move in this situation, to move or not move. And yeah, so that's why when I say like I have the stamina, it's not like everybody needs to develop this stamina. It's just something that I've noticed with myself, with things that I've experienced and how I've seen myself relate to and re-heal from different aspects of trauma that like when things do happen, when shit does pop off, I'm like, okay, Check. Let's review the roster. Ah, this is like, or the what, Rolodex. Let's review the Rolodex. Oh, remember
Rolodex. Wait, wait,
2014?
wait, 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 wait,
Yeah, yeah.
wait,
I was a
wait, wait.
93 baby.
Okay, I was getting ready to say because I know some folks that's listening to this don't know what a Rolodex is.
Well, roll your decks. If you, I was just thinking a little tech decks, roll that deck. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, so looking through my past history of different
Mm.
things I've experienced socially, interpersonally, like I can refer back to those things and be like, okay, so this is what I need to watch for with myself, with others, like when things like this have happened before, like this is usually what I go through. And like having a large community of resources too, like being very interconnected with mutual aid groups. And not just being like, hey, I need help with this, but actually forming connections with them and connecting other people with them is something that does support that stamina. And just to circle back really quickly to people's decisions to stay or leave, there's been a lot amongst like queer communities in Florida, strong opinions about whether you should stay or leave, where people are like, everyone needs to get out, run for the hills. And some people are like, I don't got money to get out. Like, I don't have support systems, other places to get out. Am I going to struggle here where I know people or struggle somewhere else where I don't know anybody? And that's the reality. And some folks are like, if you leave, you're letting them win. And that mentality isn't super helpful either, because I would never want to shame people for, what could be seen as like not having that stamina. Because I don't think people should have to develop that in order to survive. I just, when I have an opportunity to pick my struggles, I choose very particularly. I know what kind of struggles I can deal with for a certain kind of life or advantage or purpose. And I know which struggles I've experienced that I never want to go through again. And so with this, knowing that the struggle of that stamina of seeing some super conservative, crazy stuff doesn't doesn't take as much energy from me as it would to be starting in anew in a space where maybe culturally I don't see myself as much outside of transness, but also brownness.
I don't really have much experience in the South. I'm from California and I live in the
Mhm,
Bay Area, and
mhm,
so I mean, of course, don't get me wrong. There's anti-trans, there's hate, there's racism
mhm.
everywhere, right? And
Yeah.
there's certain definitely places and pockets in California where that exists.
Mhm.
So I don't want to say California is this perfect state,
Yeah, get
but
ready. I'm gonna send them all to you.
send them. But I want to say if you could give, maybe if you feel comfortable doing so, maybe give a personal experience of something that was like, yo, this is crazy, this is wild, and this shit probably wouldn't happen anywhere else. So we could kind of
Yeah.
get a better idea of that.
Oh, for sure. Well, like I have to pick my first one that comes to mind, or I could be sitting here all day with my
Hey,
other rolling of
no.
decks. My other rolling of decks.
You're gonna have
Uh,
to explain this Rolodex to folks because I'm sure somebody
I
like, yo, what the
okay.
fuck
So
is
a
a
Rolodex basically like it's you can keep all your information in these little tabs. Think of it like a filing cabinet, but fits inside your palm. You can have all this information organized with little tabs at the top, and you can just flip through.
which people don't know these days because we have that in our phones.
Yes, exactly. I was gonna say, which usually is like an address book.
Yes. All right.
It can be other things. So
Yes.
that's the Rolodex. So I shouldn't say my favorite, but like the easiest, quick go-to one was that I went to three different high schools, and I bopped around because of the crazy shit that was happening at the first two. Not to say there wasn't other stuff at the third one, but that one was in Tampa. So it was actually like not in a super conservative space. It was, more expansive. But my first high school was very like self-segregated. So majority were white. The main hallway was where everybody kind of congregated. The school was very closed in. So there would be different pockets of different types of white people all over the
Mm.
space. The different genres that you see in like the 90s movies and stuff, plus rednecks because we had those in excess in this area. And so they had their own wall. You could clearly tell which one that was because there was dip stains going down it. So it was very stereotypical. And then there was a black and brown wall. So that was where like all the not white kids would congregate there. And so it was just like the Shadowlands. It was like Scar's area in like Lion King. It was like where
Mm.
the light didn't touch, basically. I wasn't fully bilingual at the time. I still like struggle with like navigating language culturally as well outside of English because of different places I've lived. So at that time had that imposter. I was like, I can't belong on the brown wall. How am I going to communicate in English? And like obviously now I'm like, of course you could. But because of that, since like I couldn't totally immerse myself in either of those worlds, I kind of fluctuated on the cusp of both the black and brown wall and then these other white alternative spaces. Um, at one point there, because at the time I was a girl, quote unquote. So there were points where it became heated between different like Spanish speaking communities at this school. And so at one point, a Mexican girl punched a Puerto Rican girl or something. It turned into a fight. So then it turned into a whole like little like ethnic warfare thing where it was like all the Puerto Ricans were fighting the Mexicans and the black folks were just switching sides depending who was winning. And they were like pressuring me, like, you gotta go after one of these Puerto Rican girls. You're the last one that hasn't done it. And I remembered even back then being like, why are we not fighting all the white people? I was like, why are we killing each other off? This makes no sense. Like, we're not literally killing each other off, but on a grander scale. I also lived in Miami, so I also saw those interpersonal conflicts between different Spanish speaking countries. And in response to this, kind of racial warfare thing happening, people were wearing like the blue and the red. They were trying to get really like gang-like with it. They were wearing like their flags to school and stuff. So the school, to mitigate this, chose to ban all flags except for the Confederate flag.
Of course.
So
I just knew
that
that's what
was
you were
their way
getting
of
ready
being
to
like,
say.
mm. And also while I was there, like, content warning for like sexual harm, but there was also like a lot of like quote unquote like fake rape happening to different people with vulvas, including myself, where they would make like a spectacle out of basically like disrespecting someone's body and having like whole like swaths or groups watching as well. So it was just like so many
Wow.
levels of like distress and like, seeing folks that I thought were my friends also having to stand by because they didn't want to catch any of this heat either. And feeling that like huge amount of stress of like, wow, I'm really like on my own because like I can't even rely on like a sense of community on these other identities with people, much less thankfully I didn't know I was trans at the time. That would have just added another layer. But because of those kind of experiences that would snowball into like levels of sexual and racial trauma specifically, it was just so normalized that, I saw how I responded. I would reflect later on, years later. And it's unfortunate that I learned how to like spot those patterns or know how to react when those things happen. But because of those things, like I now have like a preset like emergency plan. Like anytime something's happening or I gauge something about to happen, like I can already guesstimate what may pop off and be able to like kind of be ready for that action in like a slowed nervous system way. Um, so like things like that. I went to Iowa at one point. I was there for a little bit, and people over there were like, "It's so fucking crazy here. They're so racist. They burned a cross," and I was like, "Okay." And they were like, "A cross." I was like, "Was there a person on this cross?" What? And they were like, "No, but it was." I was like, "Got you. Okay, yes, that sounds terrifying here." Um, but my hometown that we have, it's literally segregated like historically. So it's the literal translation of the wrong side of the tracks was where all the black community was. There's a lot of migrants as well, but that means that a lot of like historically um, enslaved people are buried in the same cemeteries that are like unmarked or like out in the woods and stuff. So there's like a lot of like supernatural activity as well, which for myself, I'm like, understandably, like I would be pissed for eternity. But it's just things like that, those are just like a couple of examples, but that was such a normalized thing to also experience that and then carry the weight of having a family that's very well known because of how many of this there are, to then also carry that legacy weight as well. of, okay, now you're representing this whole family, and the way you act or react to things is going to reflect on everyone, or you're expected to act or react in ways that are the same as previous people that have gone before you.
And my question is, where was the administration at this school when all of this stuff was
Oh,
happening?
oh, they were busy, putting duct tape on the holes on people's pants, being like, what? A hole in the pants? On the thighs? Absolutely not. Get the duct tape. We got to show these girls how to not tempt them. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's just very lawless. So it's definitely breeding grounds for like people acting lawless, and lawless, obviously I don't really care about the actual law.
Right.
Um lawless to like protect themselves too, which like, I also like definitely had to lean into being more of the villain a lot of the time to be like on the offense, on the defense, or I'm not a sports guy, to get ahead before like I got had. So, because of those experiences, I think it really helps me to be able to hold space for people that are experiencing those things in a way that doesn't get me super like emotional, because I've kind of like gone through it so many times that like it's not that I'm dulled to it, but I'm familiar enough with it and with myself in response to those things that I can kind of like, be able to breathe through it and like help other folks experiencing that breathe through it as well.
It's kind of a contradiction to what folks say of like, let's protect the youth, right?
Yeah.
But
Mhm.
you got crazy shit going on in a high school, but where's the
Oh, yeah.
protection for the youth? Where's the standing up? Put the
Mhm.
goddamn duct tape down and do something about what's happening. It's yeah, that's wild to me. I don't understand people's ideas of just standing by and watching things happen when you are responsible for these human beings that are under your care, right? And you just
Mhm.
allow this stuff to happen. It's just unthinkable to me.
Mhm.
I don't understand it. It's I don't know. I just don't understand it, and I'm sorry that you had to experience that and you went through some of that stuff.
Oh,
And I want to ask you, like, for folks, because we were talking about the stay in Florida, get out of Florida debate. And I know I don't want to ask you to like take a side, but what
mhm.
if there is someone listening and they're like, I don't feel safe here. I don't have a community here.
Mhm.
Maybe may or not be able to afford to get out or to stay or whatever. But what would be your advice to someone who's debating on what they should do?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely difficult. I mean, I feel for folks that are disconnected from community a lot, because I myself was very disconnected from the whole fucking world, basically,
Right.
while I was, living in this hometown. Um, I would say definitely there's a few things, a few different kind of like mutual aid or like network groups that are operating specifically in Florida that I can definitely give you like the links to and stuff if you want to put it in the description. One
Absolutely.
is a very dear friend of mine that runs Trans Florida Resources Instagram. There are a lot of documents that people have kind of formed over time of affirming doctors, not great doctors, ways to get financial aid to get out of Florida. Most of these things are online, so it's also dependent on whether people have internet access. This is another big factor. Transportation is another one. It it would definitely depend on factors of their age and different abilities for transportation and communication. I would say would be the biggest factors in that. There has been a few different grants passed around of like ways to support people in fleeing. There's also folks that know other people in other states that will like happily connect them with other resources. I myself was gonna go to Minnesota at one point. We were thinking of Minnesota because of some of their more protective laws there. And I already happened to know a parent of a trans kid there, and they were ready to like hit the ground running as soon as we got there. They're like, we'll get you connected with care, we'll introduce you to people. But I also understand that that's kind of scary for people. And that's also why some folks, even though like community seems the most safe option, are kind of anxious to get into community because social anxiety is real. Having a long history of being neglected or dismissed is real. And just being around people that have similarities with you doesn't always quell that fear. You can still have the imposter syndrome and stuff, but I would say definitely um, hashtags are important. Hashtags on Instagram, specifically Instagram is kind of where a lot of the Florida trans resources are being circulated. And a lot of it has to do, for me anyways, my decision making of staying or leaving was very heavily financial. Um, so thinking of that logistic, I would suggest thinking about like, are you possibly going to have to leave the US entirely? And if that is a possibility, maybe don't spend all your money going into another state to then have to transition yourself again to another space. Is personally what made more sense for me. Kind of looking farther out at like the state of the US in general. You can popcorn yourself off to another state. A lot of folks are choosing Denver, which I love because I love that space. However, one of my reasons why I didn't want to go there was because it's really white. Um, but in my brain, I'm also like, a lot of white people, there might be more help over there. They really care about white people being okay. So like that's probably why they got the most care over there, is because they got the trans white folks. So depends what you want to be in proximity to also. Like if being around a lot of white folks because of that added security level of like white folks being taken care of is something you're down for, slide into Denver. If being around folks, white folks, like for me, a lot of racial trauma is not something that makes you feel safe. Also listen to that too. Um, Although you are a trans person, you also have these other facets of yourself. So take into account all those facets. I think would actually be my biggest advice. Like think about your abilities, whether that's physical, mental, financial, again, um, thinking about family. Like some of us, myself, I am married. So it's not me just deciding for myself anymore. It's also thinking of the care for my spouse who is Asian American. So I'm telling you, hate crime, they would hit all the dots for us, us two together. So like even though a space may seem safe for me, I have to also think of his visibility and safety. Um, and then that also carries into whether you're considered in broader society as like quote unquote passing or not. Although like in the trans community, good trans community, I'll add, that isn't as much of like, oh, you should aspire to be passing, blah, blah, blah. Realistically, in the US, it's also something to consider if you're going to be very gender nonconforming in public too. Thinking about what spaces you're going to navigate with that. For some folks, it's like loud and proud or bust. For some people, it's loud when I can be, proud all the time. And that's also okay. Like you don't have to be out here being like super out to everybody. Like whatever's safest for you is what's more important. And whether that means like going stealth for a while, only feeling super affirmed in more private, like safe spaces for yourself doesn't make you any less trans either. Um, because that's another thing that I hear folks talk about is, being proudly trans. For me, safety wise, like I don't want to go to a trans event if they're flying these flags everywhere. I'm like, do I not already look like I got a target on my back? Why do I want to be with a bunch of y'all with this flag out? So people have those different levels of privileges and visibility. Um, and that all plays into deciding whether to stay, to leave. If you do stay, I would definitely say looking into different Discord groups as well, like looking at the Trans Florida resources, looking at the Trans Empowerment Project. And there's even like a couple of different Discords and possibly even Signal groups that are specifically for Trans Floridians that share resources too. So if you're staying, definitely get into that. Um, and also reaching out individually too is important. I myself like would be happy to connect with anybody that wants help. There have been some folks that have reached out here and there through like my other platform things to ask about personal, individual guidance or help or perspective. If that feels more comfortable for you because of those social anxieties, that's also okay. But really take into account all your intersections before you go somewhere just for the trans aspect. Um, because that is, moving is a fucking task already. It is stressful in so many ways. And landing somewhere only to find that you are facing as many hardships, but in different ways, can also be very overwhelming.
Thank you for sharing that. You kind of did. I like how you played in neutral. So you did a if you want to get out, but if you want to stay. I love that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what if, just real quick though, what if somebody wants to stay? What is your suggestion for somebody to find community?
Ooh, events for sure. Like I was saying, those hashtags. I can only really speak for Central Florida, so I frequent Orange County, Pasco County, Pinellas County, Hillsborough County, Polk County. I think those are the main ones. Those are all like central East Coast or central West Coast Florida. But I know like places that are more metropolitan will obviously have more resources. So that's why I don't usually like just, push those resources because some people can't really like afford to go out there. But hashtags for sure. Hashtags, events, P flags are another thing. Um, P flag is literally spelled P flag. And those are, I think, really good resources, whether you're a student or an adult, or you have a kid that's trans, or you're trans yourself, because those are groups of adults, like parents of LGBTQ kids that work on providing like prom nights or like other outings or like support groups and stuff like that. And they usually are super connected with anything else happening. They're often looking for board of directors too, if you want to have like more of a hand in like creating these kind of spaces and events for other folks. Um, but yeah, really the internet is the best resource right now. And I really do push the internet because, again, like it's not safe for everyone. It doesn't feel safe. Sometimes it isn't technically safe for everyone to be out there physically in these spaces. Um, so I would definitely say that for sure is the big one. There's also, if anyone wants to reach out for me, a shared Google Doc that you kind of like need to know the person you're sending it to because we don't just send it to anybody, but it has a list of different like primary care doctors and stuff like that. And a lot of word of mouth is very valuable because I did not have a great experience recently with a doctor that gave great experiences to white trans folks. So again, it's very subjective. Um, the hardship is very real, but also Florida has some really great nature. So get into a river or a spring if you're not by the coast and you don't want to pay for parking. Go to like your local wilderness spot and just know that you're just as natural as everything else you're seeing.
Hey, this is Sean Aaron. I'm the founder and executive director of Dem Bois Inc. I am also the host of Dem Bois Podcast. As you may know, Dem Bois provides financial assistance to trans men of color in order for them to obtain gender affirming surgery. We have great news. We're currently looking for volunteers to help support our programs. Our programs include our gender affirming surgery grant program and also our personal care package program. We personally curate packages filled with personal hygiene items. Just to name a few, things like tissue, soap, towels, toothpaste, and toothbrushes. We mail them out to trans men of color across the country who may be in need of help caring for their personal hygiene needs. We are looking for volunteers to help raise funds to support our programs. Also, we're looking for someone locally to the Bay Area to help us put all of the care packages together. If our mission is something that resonates with you and you would like to help support our work, just let us know. You can send an email to hello@dembois.org. That is HELLO at DEMBOIS.org. And we will get back to you with further details. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next episode. I love that. It's finding a place of calm and comfort
Mhm.
in
Yeah.
nature. Somebody
Mhm.
that's in nature is not going to look at you any different, right?
Yeah.
You are able to show up and be authentic exactly who you are, and
Mhm.
nature doesn't care.
Mhm.
I love that. That's very that's good for your mental health. It's calming, it's relaxing, and sometimes it can help you recenter yourself and refocus.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yes, that
yeah.
was great.
Having a good relationship with yourself is very difficult here. We talk a lot about how it's difficult having interpersonal relationships in Florida because that's the main big cause of, media coverage, but also, as we can see with trans youth, specifically of color, having a relationship with ourself is very difficult. Um, and like trying to have that relationship with ourselves when we don't see that outside of ourselves is definitely a time to like find somewhere of calm and be able to tap in with yourself and regulate your body a little bit.
Mm, love that. So I want to ask you a question about your career.
Mhm.
You are a digital content creator. Is that correct?
It's one of the aspects.
One of the aspects.
One of the that was one that I did mostly
Okay.
for like the past 5 years or so. I was doing YouTube for about 5 years. Last year I started grad school before I dropped out of grad school and was living in a garage. And I was like, this ain't cute for YouTube, so I'm not doing any videos in here. So I took a break from that. I'm gonna step back in to kind of channel stuff into the new project that I'm doing right now. Um, is doing prints specifically like by and for like other queer anarchists in the area. I've always been very focused on quality over quantity when it comes to people that I'm working with or for. So whether that's making art or making digital content or teaching, facilitating is a big one for me. Like communicating with people, I always want to work with folks that are like going to get the most out of it. People that are really there and like really present, or if they're not present, like being open to me helping them bring that presence and calm into their life is something that's really important to me.
And how long have you been doing that?
I've been teaching art for probably a decade, so that's a third of my life. It's the longest relationship I've ever had. Is technically with clay.
Okay.
My undergrad's in ceramics, so
Oh, nice.
I went to school for that in a school that was very much about like making successful artists. And again, the idea of what is successful in like this Western context of like gallery shows, traveling, residencies, and things. But through that program, I was like, oh, I'm not about this. I really like connecting with people, and like my happiest creative like thing to do is be the facilitator between a person and the medium that I'm showing them and getting them to connect in a way that they haven't before or be able to express something they haven't been able to before. For me, that is like my sweet spot. Like my creative flow is actually working with people, helping to bring that creativity out of them in the way that they need to see it, not the way that I think they need to express it.
I love that. So is it are you working with queer and trans folks or just anyone?
I was working more with incarcerated youth for a hot minute. I took a step back from that because somebody somehow outed me at the last facility I was at. So unfortunately, I've kind of had to put on my own air mask and be like, well, this was great, but I don't feel safe doing this anymore. Um, I also work at a museum. Sometimes I teach ceramics at like a city museum. I've worked for the city. Right now, I'm doing more independent contracting with different groups. And specifically, the thing that I really am like super excited about right now is a service called Creating with Care, where I work directly with folks that may not consider themselves creative at all,
Hmm.
but whatever the medium is, whether it's dancing, I mean, I used to get down in my femme form and I still can now. I can relate to that. I grew up with a musician. I did choreography a little bit. Like I kind of performance, lots of different things. I work with creatives that are trying to get back into their creative zone, trying to change their relationship to creating, specifically for folks that work in digital or design spaces. There's usually like this disconnect with their own work they make for themselves because they're used to making things to then be manufactured and monetized off of. And there's a huge gap in services for artists that don't just want to monetize what they make,
Mm.
for folks that just want to experience and do things, but also don't necessarily want to be labeled as doing therapy too. Specifically, queer, trans, Black, and Brown folks have complicated relationships with money and with therapy for very much the same reasons. Mental health is really important. It's also institutionalized in a lot of ways too. So in this specific service, I really hold space for whatever that person needs out of it. If they need to vent about being a gallery artist and being like, I am seen this way, I see people treat me this way, I'm burnt out over this and that stress. Okay, how can we make this a manageable and sustainable practice for yourself realistically? And not being like hustle grind culture, make the time you're trying to get out of the day. Like not everybody has the same amount of time. Working with where a person's at and helping them get to where they want to go is really, I feel very fulfilled and very much in my flow state whenever I'm working with somebody and picking apart the different things they're telling me about their lived experience, about their process, and finding ways to connect those in a way that's more enriching for them.
Do you feel like a lot of black and brown folks feel like they're not worthy to be at that other level of artistry? Where you saying of like selling the art or being in a gallery or anything else? Do you have it where you meet black and brown folks to say that? I mean, because when we think of that, we think of white culture, right?
Yeah,
And so do
yeah.
you feel like black and brown folks don't feel worthy enough to be in that arena, or are they just having problems just getting a tap into their creativity in general?
I think it's more that that arena is seen as the top level. I think that's more of the issue is that that is seen as like the ultimate success for everyone across the board. Like you're not doing well until you've made it to this.
Mm,
I mean, I have friends that are black and brown that are very well doing in that arena
mhm.
and stuff. But for me, there is a YouTuber, the only one that I ever watched. Ironically, I never watched YouTube myself, except for music. Evelyn from the internets, I believe, is her name. And she did a really great video when BLM was really starting to be more shown in the media about how like a lot of her content is just funny. She's black, the
Mm,
woman. She's also just funny, right? And how people were like, well, you need to be advocating for BLM, you need to be out
mm,
to protest, all these things. And she was like, my role in the revolution is being the comedic relief for the activists on the front lines. Like, I get to be their release and their relief, and not everybody has to do that one specific idea of what is the right way or the best way to be an activist or be working as a brown person or a black person in media in general. So for me, I kind of see it as that as well, where being in a gallery, being in these, very white spaces can be really empowering for some people and be their end goal of like, hey, I'm going to show and represent what I've seen, what I believe in these spaces. In my perception, or what I would do if I was that person would be like, and rub it in these white people's face. Um, for me, my idea of success is not really showing myself in those spaces, but more showing other people that don't even think about that what they can do outside of those spaces.
mm.
So it really depends, on that person's goals. Like for some people, that could be their goal is they want to feel deserving of these spaces. They want to be seen in these spaces. In which case, I would talk about like why does that space seem like the only one that's worth anything? Like, why is this space the almighty and like, this other space down the block from you, like this brick wall, is not as important or more important for you? It doesn't have to be. But this idea that there's only one way to be successful as a creative is something that I'm kind of trying to like help folks like break down a little bit. Again, depending on what they want to do. I definitely have seen people, I actually did a poem about being a brown face in a white space one time in a gallery. That was the extent of me being in a gallery. There are people that don't feel like they can be seen. And if someone like that is out there listening, I can definitely forward you to some really great black and brown artists that do show in galleries and don't do, the traditional like painting and bronze sculptures that usually people think of when they think of galleries.
I would love for you to share that with me so I can put it into the
Yeah.
show notes.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I love to boost my friends. I'm a
Okay.
I'm a resource raccoon, so any way I can connect people, I'll be like, that's not for me, or I don't like that, but I know someone who will, and I'm gonna get y'all together so you can see and talk.
I love that. That's what community is about, and building community, right? Sharing with other folks. Take what you need and leave what you don't, or share what you don't need,
Hmm.
right? And then to say that success is subjective. As
Hmm.
long as I feel like if you're being creative and you find that love and happiness in what you're doing and that peace, that's
Hmm.
where the success is. The moment you feel like, oh, I'm not making enough, or oh, it's not in the gallery up the street, or whatever, and that's when you lose in touch of what the success is for you.
Yeah, yeah. And for anyone that feels like they're not creative, a thing that I usually start my classes off is like asking what folks like favorite creative aspect of their lives is. And like immediately people are like, I can't even draw a stick figure. I'm like, bitch, I didn't ask about a stick figure. I asked about your life. Like, do you have stick figures in your life? No. Like, do you have kids in your life? Parenting is creative. Do you got to eat?
Absolutely. Yes.
Cooking is creative. Baking, not as creative because you got to measure stuff, but still, like you can do a cool little design. Like, are you arranging your room, changing it for something else? Are you cleaning up? Anytime you're solving a problem that you don't know the answer to already is creative. So I always challenge people to see these different everyday aspects of their life that they take for granted as like, oh, I just do this thing. Like, not every child is the same. Not every parent is the same. There are unique solutions for every set of problems in your daily life. And I always try to encourage people to see themselves as being fully creative in the ways that they're solving problems in their life. You know, if you have a physical limitation, ways to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is going to be more creative than some regular able-bodied person, you know. And that's also why I refer to myself more as a creative or a creator than an artist, is not so much because like, I don't want to be an artist, but I feel like there's more expansive possibilities of what that could mean. So I love that you tossed it out as digital creator first. I was like, yes, because sometimes people are like, you are a printmaking artist. I'm like, don't limit me now. I just feel like
Yeah,
content in
yeah.
general, like communication, creative, relating to another person, you doing a podcast, creative. You got to relate to each person that's coming on your show. You got to match the energy or change the energy. You got to figure out when to stop, pause, take a break, whatever that is. So, in terms of wrapping that into transness as well, like there's no one way to be trans, and you get to be creative with that also. And living in Florida as a trans person is unfortunately a big opportunity to get creative.
I love that. And I was hoping, I was listening to you. I was like, I just know you're gonna tie that into transness, and you did. Love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Oh,
Yeah, I've gotten it figured out. Gotten you
Yeah,
figured
yeah,
out at
yeah.
this point.
I love words just in
Yeah.
general. Communication. Ooh, yeah.
Love it. So this is the part of the show where I love to ask the guest a random question. I got
Mhm.
this list of random questions that is slowly growing. I have 40 questions now.
Ooh.
So you just pick a number between 1 and 40. It may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about today,
I already
but
know.
you
Mhm.
are you already know the question you want.
No, the number
The number. All right, go ahead. What is it?
14.
Do you know this question already? Is that why you're saying it? Have
No,
you
I
heard it?
don't. I
Okay.
know that I love 14. It
Okay.
never lets me down.
All right, perfect. And I think this question is maybe good for you in our conversation. So number 14 says, what is something you attempted to do but stopped because you found it too challenging?
Ooh. I'm a big pivoter. Um, there actually hasn't been anything that I stopped because it was too challenging. It was more that I stopped because the universe was like, you need to cut this shit out. Um, and it was actually going to the Bay Area. Um, I
Oh,
did a road trip from Florida by myself. I had all my shit in my trunk. I was really on one. I was like, that's it. I'm done with this shit. With Florida specifically. I traveled, stopped in all these states I'd never been to, through the middle of the US. So I went through like Kansas and stuff. Went to Oakland. It was after I graduated and I was gonna do performance art. That was gonna be my jam. Like, spoken word, naked, rolling in mud, the whole deal. I was ready for it. And I was like, out west is where that stuff is happening. So let me go over there, check their mud out, talk to some people, see some slam poets or whatever. And I had a job at Bullseye Glass Company, like an interview lined up. I was gonna be work exchanging with the dance company as well. And within 24 hours of getting into Oakland, going to San Francisco, bopping around, I was T-boned at an intersection and like flipped through the intersection multiple times. Like my car was fucked up. Like I thankfully it wasn't too fucked up. But like, I lost pretty much everything that I was aspiring to, like through that. There was no financial coming back from that in a place where I wasn't already established. Um, so besides being, having a very like existential, like, I hate you, God, whatever that means, I was just like, okay, now I recognize like there had been moments leading up to getting into Oakland that were signs for me that I was pushing for something that maybe wasn't actually for me at that time. It didn't mean that it couldn't be ever, but like right then, I should have paused. When I was in Utah looking at the houses on the hills and being like, wow, that's beautiful. Nope, got to get to Oakland. I was like, oh, when I was like stopping here and there, when I looked at the smog, I was like, oh, I don't like this shit, but I'll make it work because like, how else am I gonna work? So for me, there hasn't really ever been a challenge where I was like, this is too difficult for me. I don't want to do it. It's my issue is more that I will like slam through it and be like, I'm doing this. I don't care what takes me out. And the universe will be like, bitch, how about a car? How about,
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that? Yeah. So my brother, in response to that, which I've held on to ever since as kind of like a thing to check in with myself and see if I'm aligning with, my sense of what my purpose is and also what environmentally seems like safe or correct for myself, is he asked, would anything less have stopped you?
Mm. Wow.
And I was like, whoa, yeah, no. I was like, I thought I didn't even have to think that hard. I was like, yeah, you're right. Nothing really stops me a lot of the time.
Mm.
Like once I'm set on something, so that was back in 2018,
Mm.
I had like spiritual occurrences, crises, whatever. I've had a very fruitful spiritual journey over the years. But now, whenever I encounter some sort of resistance that's not necessarily in me, but something that I'm picking up like externally, um, I don't beat myself up for it. Like I'll actually just be like, okay, not right now. Cool. Heard. You don't gotta take me out. Like it's
No
I'm
more car
listening.
accidents, but
Yeah,
yeah.
no more of that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I am a big fan of pivoting, like even between the YouTube channel and now doing Uppercutt as my printing series, and then teaching as well, like choosing to collaborate or recognize when the collaborations are no longer working and being able to advocate for myself and say like this isn't working, but we can still have a good communication, we can still stay connected. I don't see things getting difficult as something that should totally stop me, but I also stay receptive to like, other signs that maybe this other route is what I need to be doing right now or focusing on. And, after that accident, I went to Iowa because the person I was with at the time was in school for aviation there. And I was like, I'm not
Mm.
going back to Florida like a failure. I'm going to
Mm.
Iowa like a different kind of failure. And you know what? Iowa is where I met all of my leftist friends. Like I didn't even know that was a whole political sphere that I would align with. I'd never seen it, just like transness. It's where I met non-binary trans people and like really connected in a way communally with people that I never had before. And like what I took out of that was like, firstly, I should have just turned my happy ass up from Kansas and just gone to Iowa instead. Secondly, that just because I really, really want something doesn't mean it's for me at that time. And just because I see it and I really want it doesn't mean I have to keep it to myself either. Like sometimes great opportunities that maybe don't line up quite right for you are meant for someone you know. And it's your job to pass that along, And it's understandable that we want to hoard these things to ourselves, like these experiences to ourselves, these opportunities to ourselves. We're growing up with scarcity mindsets all the time. 1993 cohort, thank you. We've never been financially stable our whole lives, but being part of community isn't just receiving that care, it's also giving it out and trusting that that will come back to you. And even if it doesn't immediately, that like you've played your little drop in the universe to make someone else's life easier.
Beautiful. I'm glad that you survived that car accident. And I'm glad the universe was like, yo, check this out. That what I tell you, boom. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes we
Right?
gotta get hit hard. And I'm glad your brother kind of like got you to snap back into reality. And that's a reflection for you now in life. I love that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, we're gonna wrap up. I want to ask you, is there anyone last thing that you would like to say to folks that are listening?
I'm just reiterating that, you don't have to be a purist in any sense of the word. You don't have to be fully just one thing. Um, and when I say purist, it's not that like you're not holy, you're not good, you're not innocent, but saying that you're wholly just trans, and this is the perfect way to be that. You don't have to subscribe to whatever that is. You don't have to be, for me, like the perfect Chicano ever. Know every word of slang in English and Spanish. Like there is no pure, perfect way to be that. And allowing yourself to be subjective with yourself and others. Just because you see something working really well for someone doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for you. And on that same note, like even if something works really well for you, hold yourself back from that unsolicited advice. Because sometimes people just need to talk about stuff. People just need to unload some and have yourself carry some of that weight. You don't have to solve every problem, but you also have to stay receptive to what role you can bring into the conversation.
Mm, I love that. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for that bit of advice. Thank you for being a guest on the show. I really appreciate having you here.
Yeah, I appreciate you having this show.
So we have reached the end of this episode. I want to say thank you for listening to Dem Bois Podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. Be sure to visit our website at dembois.org. That is DEMBOIS.org. If you would like to connect with us, be sure to follow us on Instagram or Facebook. If you think you would be a great guest on the show, or if you know somebody you think would be a great guest on the show, there's multiple ways to request to be a guest on the show. First is you can go visit our Instagram page, click the link in our bio, and from there you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Or you can visit our website, click the programs tab up top, scroll down to podcast, click the podcast button, and from there on the podcast page, you'll be able to request to be a guest on the show. Yo, we need questions, y'all. If you have those burning questions, a question that you want to ask me or a future guest on the show, there's multiple ways that you can send in questions, right? So first, you can go to Instagram, DM us that question, or you can email us at hello@dembois.org. That's HELLO, like hi, at dembois.org. Be sure to like the show. Be sure to share this show out with your friends and other folks in your networks. So until next time, take care.